A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. These iconic words from the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels echo the revolutionary spirit of 1848, a year of upheaval, when the old order trembled before the demands for democracy, rights, and freedom. This is the second video in our series, Understanding Marxism-Leninism. In this episode, we delve into the Communist Manifesto, a concise yet world-shaking document that has inspired revolutions, shaped nations, and challenged the very fabric of capitalism itself. Today, this manifesto remains a cornerstone of Marxist thought, connecting the struggles of 19th century factory workers to the global fight for justice and equality in the 21st century. To understand the Communist Manifesto, we must first explore the world that gave birth to it. The century leading up to its publication in 1848 was a period of profound transformation, a time when feudal societies began to collapse and capitalism emerged as the dominant economic system. When Europeans discovered the Americas in the late 1400s, it changed the world forever. It opened the door to vast new resources, gold, silver, and cash crops like sugar and tobacco. These riches helped reshape Europe and played a big role in creating the capitalist system. The wealth from the New World didn't come peacefully. It was taken through force. Conquistadors looted villages and enslaved millions of Africans and indigenous people. They were forced to work in mines and on plantations under brutal conditions. This wealth flowed into Europe, making kings, merchants, and bankers very rich. They used this money to expand trade, build factories, and invest in new inventions. It was the fuel that powered the rise of capitalism. At the same time, many common people in Europe were being pushed off their land. In England, for example, landlords fenced off shared fields to raise sheep for wool, a process called enclosure. This left peasants with nowhere to farm. With no land to farm, people moved to cities to look for work. Many ended up working in factories for low wages. These changes created a new group of people, the working class. The connection between Europe's new industries and the colonies was clear. Sugar, cotton, and other goods from the colonies were shipped to European factories. The finished products were sold back to the colonies. This global trade made Europe even richer. But this system wasn't just about trade. It was built on exploitation. European wealth came at the cost of millions of lives and the destruction of traditional ways of living around the world. Marx and Engels called this process primitive accumulation. It's how capitalism got its start. The wealth stolen from the Americas and Africa didn't just fund industries. It created new divisions in society between the rich who owned factories and plantations and the poor who had to work for them. The discovery of the New World and the rise of capitalism transformed Europe and the world. But this transformation came with deep inequalities and suffering. Marx and Engels believed that understanding these changes was key to imagining a better, fairer society. By the early 1800s, Europe was a continent in turmoil. Industrialization was changing how people lived and worked, creating vast inequalities between the wealthy and the working class. At the same time, political revolutions in America and France had inspired new ideas about freedom, equality, and democracy. These revolutions showed that old systems of power could be overthrown. But for many workers and intellectuals, these changes didn't go far enough. While monarchies fell, new systems controlled by the wealthy capitalist class took their place. In factories and workshops, workers began to organize. They demanded shorter hours, higher pay, and better working conditions. These early movements, like the Chartists in Britain, fought for basic political rights, such as the right to vote. But they also planted the seeds of something bigger. Out of this growing unrest came new ideas about society. Groups like the League of the Just, formed in the 1830s, believed in the possibility of a fairer world where people lived as equals. The League operated in secret, bringing together workers and intellectuals across Europe to fight for social justice. But the League faced a problem. While their goals were noble, they lacked a clear plan. Their early slogans, like "All men are brothers," inspired hope, but didn't explain how to achieve their vision. That's when two young radicals, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, stepped in. Marx and Engels were thinkers and activists who wanted to move beyond vague ideals. They believed the root of inequality was in the economic system itself. They argued that to change society, the working class needed to overthrow capitalism and create a new system, communism. In 1847, Marx and Engels joined the League of the Just. Under their leadership, the group adopted a new name, the Communist League. It declared its mission with a bold new slogan, "Working men of all countries unite." Later that year, the League asked Marx and Engels to write a document that would explain their ideas. They wanted something clear and powerful, a guide for the working class to understand their place in history and how they could change it. The result was the Communist Manifesto. The manifesto was published in February 1848, just as revolutions swept through Europe. It called on workers to rise up not just to demand reforms, but to overthrow the entire system of capitalism. Its ideas were radical, and they continue to inspire debate and action to this day. The Communist League and the manifesto it created were more than products of their time. They were the beginnings of a movement that sought to change the course of history. To understand the manifesto is to understand the struggles and hopes of millions who believed in the possibility of a better world. The Manifesto of the Communist Party, better known as the Communist Manifesto, begins with an unforgettable declaration. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. These words set the tone for the manifesto. Marx and Engels wanted to make it clear that communism was no longer just an idea whispered in secret meetings. It had become a force that rulers feared and the oppressed embraced. At the time, the ruling classes, monarchs, aristocrats, and capitalists, had already labeled their opponents communists as a way to discredit them. Marx and Engels turned this accusation into a rallying cry. They called on communists to openly declare their goals and challenge the existing order. The Preamble is a statement of purpose, a call for unity among workers across the world. It challenges the status quo and boldly asserts that the old systems of power, monarchies, feudalism, and unchecked capitalism, are crumbling under the weight of their own contradictions. Marx and Engels argue that the very fear of communism among the ruling classes proves its power. They write that communists must seize this moment to make their case to the world, to explain their vision and strategy for a new kind of society. The Preamble sets the stage for the rest of the manifesto. It is not just a critique of the old world, but a declaration of hope for a new one. A world where workers control their destinies, where exploitation ends, and where true equality is possible. With the Preamble, Marx and Engels did more than announce their intentions. They issued a challenge to the world, a challenge that remains relevant to this day. The first chapter of the Communist Manifesto is called Bourgeois and Proletarians. In this section, Marx and Engels explain the history of society as a story of class struggles, conflicts between groups of people who have different roles in the economy. In the past, these struggles took many forms, between slaves and their masters, between peasants and feudal lords, or between guild artisans and wealthy merchants. Over time, these old systems collapsed, and a new class took power, the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie are the capitalists, the people who own factories, businesses, and other means of production. They became powerful during the Industrial Revolution, when machines, factories, and mass production changed the way goods were made. With this rise in industry, the bourgeoisie didn't just build factories, they built an entire system based on profit. Their wealth depended on the work of a new class, the proletariat. The proletariat are the working class. These are people who don't own land, tools, or businesses. Instead, they sell their labor, working for wages so they can survive. But this system is not fair. Marx and Engels argue that the bourgeoisie exploit the proletariat. Workers produce goods that are worth far more than what they're paid. The difference, the profit, goes to the bourgeoisie. To keep making profits, the bourgeoisie expanded their system across the world. They searched for new markets, resources, and workers. This global expansion forced many societies to adopt capitalist ways of life, often through violence and exploitation. But capitalism has a major problem. It's unstable. Marx and Engels point out that capitalism creates more goods than people can afford to buy, leading to economic crises. During these crises, businesses fail, workers lose their jobs, and entire economies collapse. Marx and Engels argue that these crises make the proletariat stronger. Over time, workers see that their struggles are shared, and they begin to organize. They form unions, stage protests, and fight for their rights. These small struggles are steps towards something much bigger, a revolution. In the end, Marx and Engels believe that capitalism will destroy itself. The bourgeoisie have created their own enemies, the proletariat, who will eventually rise up, overthrow the system, and build a new society without exploitation. In the second chapter of the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels explain the role of communists in the workers' struggle. They begin by answering an important question: what makes communists different from other working-class movements? Communists are not a separate party opposed to workers' organizations. Instead, they represent the most advanced and united part of the working class. They work to bring together all workers, regardless of nationality, and focus on the big picture, ending capitalism and building a new society. Communists believe that the working class must become a political force. By uniting, workers can overthrow the bourgeoisie and take control of the government to build a fairer system. But what exactly do communists want? Marx and Engels make it clear that their goal is not to take away personal belongings or things workers have earned. Instead, they want to abolish bourgeois private property, the property that allows capitalists to exploit workers. In capitalist society, wealth is created by workers but controlled by the bourgeoisie. This kind of property creates inequality, allowing a small group of people to grow rich by exploiting the labor of others. Communists believe this system must end. Communists also reject the idea that society must always be divided into classes. They envision a world where the means of production, factories, farms, and resources, are owned collectively. In this world, wealth would be shared, and everyone would contribute based on their ability and receive based on their need. To achieve this, Marx and Engels outline several steps, including abolishing inheritance, introducing progressive taxes, and providing free public education. These changes are meant to take power away from the bourgeoisie and give it to the people. Communists also emphasize internationalism. They argue that workers everywhere share the same struggle, regardless of borders. National differences are used by the bourgeoisie to divide and weaken the working class, but communists aim to bring workers together in solidarity. Ultimately, communists believe in building a society where freedom and development are not limited to a privileged few, but are available to everyone. This vision is not just about economics. It's about creating a world where people can live with dignity and equality. In this chapter, Marx and Engels show us that communists are not just dreamers. They are organizers, strategists, and advocates for real change. They work to unite workers and guide them toward a future where exploitation and inequality are things of the past. In Chapter 3, Socialist and Communist Literature, Marx and Engels discuss the major tendencies of socialist thought during their time. In this chapter, they demonstrate that communists are not merely idealists or dreamers. They are practical organizers, strategic thinkers, and advocates for real transformative change. The first type of socialism they discuss is reactionary socialism. These ideas came from people who wanted to bring back the old feudal system or limit the power of capitalism without fully changing it. Marx and Engels divided this group into three categories: feudal socialism, petty bourgeois socialism, and German or true socialism. Feudal socialists were aristocrats who criticized capitalism because it threatened their own power. They claimed to care about the poor, but their real goal was to return to the old feudal system, where peasants were tied to the land and served the lords. Marx and Engels call out their hypocrisy, noting that these aristocrats weren't really interested in justice. They just wanted to keep their privileges. Petty bourgeois socialists came from small business owners and farmers who felt crushed by both big capitalists and the growing working class. They wanted to turn back the clock to a time when small businesses could thrive. While their concerns were real, Marx and Engels argued that their ideas were backward-looking and impossible to achieve in a rapidly industrializing world. German socialists tried to adapt French socialist ideas to Germany, but they stripped away the revolutionary aspects. They turned socialism into abstract philosophy, focused more on eternal truths than on practical solutions for the working class. Marx and Engels criticized this as detached and ineffective. The second type of socialism Marx and Engels critique is conservative or bourgeois socialism. This came from wealthy people who wanted to make small changes to capitalism to reduce its worst effects, without giving up their own wealth and power. These socialists supported things like charity, labor laws, or even improving working conditions. But their goal was to keep the capitalist system running smoothly, not to change it. Marx and Engels argue that this kind of socialism is a way for the bourgeoisie to appear compassionate while maintaining their control over society. The third type of socialism they discuss is critical utopian socialism. Thinkers like Charles Fourier, Robert Owen, and Henri de Saint-Simon envisioned ideal societies where everyone worked together for the common good. They designed detailed plans for communities free of exploitation. While Marx and Engels admired the intentions of these thinkers, they argued that utopian socialism was unrealistic. It didn't address the root cause of inequality, capitalism. Utopians believed they could convince society to peacefully adopt their ideas, but Marx and Engels argued that real change would only come through class struggle. Marx and Engels explain that communism is different from these other ideas because it's based on a scientific understanding of history and society. Communism doesn't rely on abstract ideals or backward-looking solutions. Instead, it's grounded in the reality of class struggle and the belief that the working class can lead the way to a new system. Unlike other forms of socialism, communism seeks to overthrow the capitalist system entirely and replace it with a classless society. It doesn't just dream about the future, it provides a roadmap for how to get there. The final chapter of the Communist Manifesto is titled "The Position of the Communists in Relation to the Various Existing Opposition Parties." In this section, Marx and Engels explain how communists interact with other political and social movements of their time. They clarify that while communists share some goals with other groups, their ultimate mission sets them apart. Europe in the mid-19th century was full of political movements fighting for change. Some wanted to overthrow monarchies, while others sought better working conditions or independence for oppressed nations. The communists saw these movements as allies in the fight against the existing order, but their approach was unique. Marx and Engels acknowledged that communists fight alongside other groups to achieve immediate goals, like political freedoms or better wages. But they are always working toward the bigger picture, the overthrow of capitalism and the creation of a classless society. For example, in France, communists supported the Social Democrats against conservative and radical bourgeoisie. In Britain, they worked with the Chartists, who were demanding political reforms like universal suffrage. In Poland, they allied with groups calling for agrarian revolution and national independence. At the same time, Marx and Engels make it clear that communists don't blindly follow other movements. They critically evaluate these groups and challenge ideas that don't align with their ultimate goal of socialism. The communists focus on the root cause of inequality, private property and the exploitation it enables. While other groups might stop at political reform, communists push the conversation toward economic revolution. Marx and Engels believed Germany was on the brink of a bourgeois revolution, one that would challenge feudal power and bring industrial capitalism to dominance. They argued that this revolution, like those in England and France, was a necessary step toward the rise of the proletariat. Communists supported these revolutionary movements, but saw them as just the beginning. Once the bourgeoisie overthrew the old feudal structures, the proletariat would be in a stronger position to challenge the bourgeoisie itself. Above all, Marx and Engels emphasized internationalism. They believed that workers' struggles were not confined by borders. A revolution in one country would inspire revolutions elsewhere, and global solidarity was essential for success. The communists worked to unite democratic and revolutionary groups across nations, seeing the global capitalist system as their common enemy. The manifesto ends with a bold call to action. Marx and Engels write that communists do not hide their goals. They openly declare their intention to overthrow the existing social order. Their vision is clear. A society where workers control the means of production and exploitation is a thing of the past. With these words, the Communist Manifesto concludes, not as a mere critique of capitalism, but as a rallying cry for revolution. Its call for unity and action continues to inspire workers and activists around the globe. Throughout the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels provide a powerful critique of capitalism and a vision of a new society based on equality, solidarity, and freedom from exploitation. Their ideas continue to inspire movements for justice and change, reminding us that a better world is not just possible, it's necessary. We hope this video has deepened your understanding of this revolutionary text and sparked your curiosity to learn more. What are your thoughts on the Communist Manifesto? Do you think its ideas are still relevant today? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more content exploring Marxist-Leninist theory and its lessons for today's world. And be sure to click the notification bell so you don't miss our next video in the Understanding Marxist-Leninism series.